All right, here we go. Hello, hello, and welcome back. It's nice to see you again as I adjust my laptop to get the camera correct. Um, I say it's nice to see you again as if I can see you. I can. I can see you. All right. Anyway, um, send help. No. This is the Humanities Gig or the Republic to Empire uh, module. Sometimes I call it Roman Republic 2, but I've got it listed on the schedule, I think, as Republic to Empire. Anyway, that's this one. You're in the right place. Um, Okie pokey. So, let's get started. Let's get started, y'all. Last time, last episode. Last time we talked about the slow expansion of the Roman Republic over the Achaean Peninsula. About 200 years, from about 500 to about 300. The Roman Republic very slowly gobbled up the rest of the Roman Peninsula. Um, uh, Making allies, absorbing nearby tribes into its own polity, and basically sort of becoming a regional power. Now, bear in mind that being the masters of all Italy still is not a huge deal in the larger scale of things in the whole area of the Mediterranean slash Mesopotamian area that we've been talking about thus far in class. Um, Between 500 and 300, um, for instance, you've got the Persian Empire. Remember them from Achaean Greece? Those Gigios? Yeah, the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire gets into a fight with the Achaean Greeks starting in around 500, and off and on, they lose at first, they come back and they have some more victories, etc., etc. Um, but they're still in power, stretching all the way from the Persian Plateau east of Mesopotamia, all the way through Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent, um, up into the Anatolian Peninsula. They're still a big deal. This is a huge empire. And then in North Africa and along the southern coast of what we would now call Spain and France, you have the Carthaginians, um, the Phoenicians, in other words. The people, they're ethnically Phoenicians. Their main city is Carthage, so we can refer to it as the Carthaginian civilization or the Phoenician civilization, either way. Um, yeah, we got them, and they have a very large area that they hold based on trade. Uh, very impressive territory. Meanwhile, like I said, and this is between 500 and 300, meanwhile, you've got the Romans just taking over Italy. So if you look at a map, you can see that, good for them. Good for them taking over Italy. Aw, that's cute. Good for you. I love that for you. Or some other passive aggressive thing you can say. Um, yeah, you got uh, the Romans taking over Italy, but that is, in the grand scheme of things, not that big a deal. Uh, so this is a relatively between 500 and 300 BCE. This is it's an expansion, but it's a relatively small scale expansion, and it was a slow expansion. So you have 200 years to expand over a fairly small area. It's no wonder that the Republic, even though it wasn't, the Republic was still kind of a janky creation in terms of its political stability. It was new. Nobody had a map for how to build a republic. The Romans were, in on the ground floor of that idea. So everyone was still figuring out how to make it work. Um, and honestly, it's probably fortunate for the Republic that for the first 200 years it was only advancing very slowly over a small area. It helped with the stability of things. The changes to the changes to the territorial and cultural makeup of the Republic for those first 200 years were not great. They were changes that the political and cultural system of the time could easily absorb and adapt to. So, why am I telling you all this? Well, context. Because what happens next between about 300 and 150, what happens next is a period that I refer to as the period of problematic expansion. Um, this is when things start getting kinda wacky. Um, the uh, the Roman Republic gets the pressure for this is that the Roman Republic gets into a series of wars that will um, wind up massively increasing Roman territory and Roman wealth. Uh, and honestly, and I think this is a general historical consensus by this point. Honestly, um, it seems to me, it feels like to me that a lot of the problems that come about that will doom the Republic, doom, a lot of the problems that will doom the Republic are are directly due to due to the fact that a cultural and social system that was originally designed to govern a small regional power that started off not even controlling all of Italy is suddenly made to made to be in charge of basically the entirety of the Mediterranean, all of North Africa, southern Spain, southern France, into Greece, the whole 9 yards. Um, so basically, what you have is a system. By the time we get to 150, by the time we get to 150, you have a system that was intended for small scale governance, running a huge area. And that's not a recipe for stability. The fact that everything goes to hell in a handbasket after about 150 BCE is not surprising to me, because between 500 and 300, Rome, under this cobbled together republican system, is expanding over slowly over a very small territory, and it can handle that. But then between 300 and 150, Rome, under this janky Republican system, expands over a huge territory, and that proves to be too much. That proves to be too much of too much for it to handle, and then things go cuckoo bird. Okay, so that's the setup. So let's get into specifics. Any questions? No? No questions? I told you I could see you. Okay, no questions. All right, so let's look at my slides. Slides, baby. All right. Late Republic problematic expansion. So the first element of the problematic expansion, the Punic Wars between 300 and 150. Okay, so the Punic Wars were a series of wars between Rome and Carthage. Um, as I said, Carthage was a major power in the Western Mediterranean. They controlled a good bit of North Africa, southern Spain, southern France, those areas. Oh, sorry about that. Um, their wealth and power were based on trade. Um, and Rome will wind up going to war with them over the course of 150 years. There are separated wars that will only amount to about 50 years of warfare. Mind you, 50 years of warfare is still a lot. That's a big number. But um, it's only, quote unquote, only 50 years of warfare over the course of 150 years, spread out among these wars. But the relationship between Carthage and Rome is contentious enough during this entire period that Carthage would be considered kind of a generational enemy of Rome for this whole period until the final defeat of Carthage. Spoilers, Rome wins. Um, until the final defeat of Carthage. Um, okay. Um, so let's see here. So who were the Carthaginians? So the Carthaginians were Phoenicians. Um, the Phoenicians originally lived in what we would now call a region called the Levant, Levant, the Levant, which is basically just the far eastern coast of the Mediterranean. Um, so the area that would now include like Israel and Syria and things like that, and Lebanon and so on and so forth. Um, they originated there. They built up an empire based on trade, um, uh, which and their trade success was built on their ability to create a certain kind of purple dye. Uh, we may think of we may think of that as weird, like why, like it's just a dye, but the ability to like make certain colors is I mean that's a technology, and it's not something that we've always had. We haven't always had the ability to make the same colors, and apply them to like clothes and stuff. uh, that's not always been super easy, um, throughout history. So being able to come up with a good industrial process for making colors is important. That you can make a lot of money off that. Just like if you come up with a new industrial process for making plastic or something, you could make a lot of money off of that. Um, you can make a lot of money off of that, and same way with color. Like you came up with a new, reliable, affordable industrial process for making purple back then. or some other color, you can make a lot of money. And the Phoenicians were known for this. Phoenician, this Phoenician purple, as it was called, was very lucrative. Um, so okay, like for instance, sorry, just gonna add one more example. Uh, it wasn't. It wasn't until relatively recently. In It wasn't until relatively recently, maybe 16th, 17th century, before we had a way of making a reliable green dye for clothing. Like, look at my sweater, right? It's green. Um, but uh, it would have been very difficult to make green colored clothing in the European Middle Ages, for instance. And the clothing wouldn't, even if you could make it green, it wouldn't have stayed green because the green dyes that existed, they weren't color fast. They didn't resist sunlight or water or anything like that. Um, so colors. Venetian purple, big deal. Um, the Phoenicians also, interestingly enough, were the first ancient people um, to develop a a purely phonetic alphabet. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but you should look that up. It's kind of amazing. Um, Ancient language scripts usually used either some kind of hieroglyphic script, like the Egyptians did, where each hieroglyph represents like an entire word or concept, um, or they used a syllabic script where each symbol represents an entire syllable, um, like mu or fa or something like that, or go or whatever, and you sort of string those together to make your word. The Phoenicians actually came up with the idea of an alphabet that uses a single sound per symbol that you can then put the whole thing together. And that may sound familiar because that's what our alphabet uses and what almost every other alphabet on the planet uses. And interestingly enough, as far as we can tell, the Phoenicians were the only ones who ever invented that. Everybody else got the idea ultimately from them. They got the idea from someone who got the idea from someone who got the idea from them, or directly from the Phoenicians, apparently. So that's pretty wild. So you should look up the phonetic alphabet and the history of that. Anyway, they didn't make any money off of that. Um, Apparently, they hadn't heard of. They didn't think about marketing hooked on phonics. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, okay, so the Phoenicians originated in the Levant. Um, as the Persians took over that area, the Persian Empire autocracy is not good for trade. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Uh, the Persians imposed restrictions on who the Phoenicians could trade with. They took heavy tributes from the Phoenicians that affected their profits. And the Phoenicians basically said, screw this, and relocated westward along the southern Mediterranean coast until they reached a new area where they based themselves out of a city called Carthage. Um, Carthage is roughly where Tunis is today in Tunisia. It's pretty close. It's not identically in the same spot, but it's very, very close to Tunis. So it's basically the same place. So that's where they were based out of, and then they grew their empire from there. And so by the time we reach about 300 BCE, that's the central location of the Carthaginian Empire. Okay, so all that, so much gore set up. So let's get to the next bit, the dispute over Sicily. Okay, so around 300, a little bit after, but you know how I like to round things off. Around 300, um, Carthage had some colonies or some bases, however you want to put it, on Sicily, which is a little island fairly near Italy, right off the toe of the boot, kind of. Um, and also, though, within what the Carthaginians considered to be their sphere of influence. Um, so that was sort of, they considered it to be within their territory. And Rome, remember, between 500 and 300, had expanded over the whole of Italy and was now looking beyond Italy. And the first place they looked was to Sicily, this little island that's nearby. There's not a lot on Sicily to recommend it, but you know, it's right there. I just offended some Sicilians. I'm very sorry. Um, anyway. Um, so basically, boiling down an enormous amount of history, the Romans got into a snit with the Carthaginians over who had territorial rights to Sicily. And this, because they could not play nice, this escalated into open warfare. Rather than being solved diplomatically, it got ugly. Um, so this is the First Punic War. Punic, you might be asking where that name comes from. Uh, the Roman, uh, the Roman name for Carthage was just Poenai, because Phoenician, so it's the Roman term for Phoenicians. Um, Poenai and Punic, thus Punic War thus means more or less the war with the Phoenicians. So okay. Um, so goes into the First Punic War. So the deal is, why did I minimize that? Sorry, wrong thing. Nope, wrong thing again. Back to the slide. There we go. I got it. So the deal is, the First Punic War was difficult for both sides because of limitations they had on their ability to wage war effectively against the other. The Carthaginians, being a trade based civilization, had an excellent navy. And they were able to basically land, because they were in North Africa, remember, they were able to basically land in southern Italy unopposed anytime they wanted to. And the Romans at first were similarly unable to make their way effectively to North Africa with any number of their troops and ships intact. So the Carthaginians could easily invade southern Italy, and the Romans could not easily invade northern Africa. This sounds like it's super, super bad for the Romans, um, but the Romans on their side had a vastly superior army. Um, on land, the Romans were easily the conqueror civilization. On the water, the Carthaginians were. So basically, the Carthaginians could get to Italy whenever they wanted, but they couldn't do anything after that. They'd arrive on land, and the Romans would just kick their butts. And conversely, if the Romans could have made it to North Africa, they would have done super, super well, but they never did at first because the Carthaginians would always stop them on the water. So this is obviously a sort of stalemate situation where neither party can gain the upper hand. I'm simplifying a lot of stuff, and that's okay because this is a humanities survey course. We're not going to get into the weeds about this. Now, and you could, if you want to ask me, like, why did Rome have the better army, there are a number of answers there. I could get into the whole thing about Rome having a citizen army and Carthage having primarily a mercenary army. It's a cool bit. I'm not going to get too deep into that, except to say that the Carthaginians got most of their troops from other civilizations that they had trade contacts with. Because the Carthaginians, to make it a very short and overly simplified explanation, the Carthaginians just did not like having their own skin in the game. If they could get foreigners to fight for them, they were going to do that. Um, and that led to certain logistical difficulties. Big sections of the Carthaginian army, because they were foreigners from different foreign countries. Uh, Portions of the Carthaginian army could not speak to each other, and Carthaginian commanders often could not speak to their armies without the use of translators or intermediaries. Obviously, not an ideal situation. Plus, foreign mercenaries are never going to be as motivated to fight for your cause, for your safety, as your own people are. The Romans, by contrast, had a highly professionalized citizen military, and anyway, they were a better army than the Carthaginians. That's the takeaway. Um, so, what happened? What changed? What broke the stalemate? Well, what broke the stalemate was something that we see over and over again with the Romans, and that will become important again later. Is that the Romans were IP thieves? No, sorry, that's a bad way to put it. Um, the Romans, interestingly enough, they're very practical people, and that had some downsides. I like to joke and say that if the Romans couldn't stab somebody or build something to solve a problem, they weren't interested in solving it. Roman solutions were all about scabbing and building. Um, that's my joke. Um, uh, my joke, TM, do not scale. No, sorry. Uh, what? Yeah, right. Um, but the nicer way to put it, the more accurate way is probably this: that the Romans were a really practical people, and although they had a great deal of national pride about them, they were proud of being Romans, and they celebrated their Romanness in a lot of ways. They were not too proud. They were not so proud that they didn't adopt good ideas from other people when they came across them. It was one of the strengths of the Roman civilization in both the late Republican phase and the Imperial phase, is that as they spread like glitter over a huge territory. Seriously, glitter gets everywhere. Anyway, as they spread like glitter over a huge territory, they would adopt new practices and technologies from the people that they conquered um, very readily. The Romans were very, very flexible in that regard. So, um, this is going to be useful to them uh, in the Punic Wars because during the course of the First Punic War, the Romans the Romans basically started to learn from the Carthaginian naval superiority, while the Carthaginians never did really learn, or they knew about the weaknesses of their mercenary army system. They just never were able to take the necessary steps to correct it. They lacked the political will, or it conflicted with cultural imperatives. I don't know which way to put it. Um, but basically, the Carthaginians were never able to fix what was wrong with their military machine, and the Romans were able to fix what was wrong with theirs. The Romans basically recovered Carthaginian ships that had been abandoned or wrecked on South Italian soil. They recovered them, they studied them, they started learning how to build ships like the Carthaginians. They started making observations of how the Carthaginians handled their ships, of the Carthaginian naval procedures. They built a lake and built a lake on in the inland of Italy. They built a lake and they launched their faux Carthaginian ships on that lake and practiced how to handle them in an environment where the Carthaginians wouldn't see what they were doing. So they got good at this. They leveled up their navy in secret and then were able to launch new naval ships and new naval practices to rival the Carthaginians, which is pretty cool, if you ask me. And you are now required to think it's cool as well, because I control your grade. No, I'm kidding. Um, Naughty. I can't do that. Yeah. No. You're not required to think it's cool, but it is objectively. If you don't, you're wrong. Um. Any. Sorry. 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 Um. Anyway, so basically, the Romans were able, again, simplifying a whole bunch of stuff and skipping over a whole bunch of stuff. The Romans were able to defeat the Carthaginians because the Romans leveled up their weak areas, which is to say their naval abilities, while maintaining their strength, their army strength, and the Carthaginians never leveled up their army, um, and then they were being matched equally on the navy side. It didn't work out for them. So, again, skipping a lot of detail, between roughly 300 and roughly 150, the Romans managed to take on and defeat the Carthaginians, and they were not gracious in defeat. 150 years of intermittent warfare had made the Romans shirty about the whole thing. They were a little testy with the Carthaginians. It became a Roman saying, a Roman slogan almost. Carthago delenga est. Carthage must be destroyed. Carthago delenga est. Like a Roman political slogan almost. Carthage must be destroyed. That, I mean, that sort of puts a point on it. Like, well, they're pretty upset about this whole thing. So when they finally defeated Carthage, they burned down the city, and the legend has it, whether this is true or not, I don't know. The legend has it that they salted the earth outside of the city of Carthage. They sowed salt into the earth, into the crop fields and into the farmlands, so that nothing would ever grow there again, and no one could live there anymore because nothing could be grown there. Wow, right? Petty, petty vengeance at that level. That, I mean, that's just extra. That's a lot. Um, wow. So the Romans won, and in the course of winning, they basically inherited, if you will, the entirety of Carthage's territory. Um, they, in essence, came into control of all of North Africa, southern Spain, southern France. That's huge. Literally, I'm not saying huge like big if true. I'm saying huge as in literally huge. A large amount of land. Um, Again, between 500 and 300, Rome expanded over Italy. Italy's lovely. I've been there. It's nice. Can recommend. 8 out of 10 at least. Um, but, not to be rude to any Italians who might be listening, it ain't that large. And there's not like a huge amount of natural resources there. So, yeah, Italy, lovely area. Um, Nice little scooters. Vespas, Vespa scooters. Very cute. Um, Roman thing. No, I'm kidding. That comes later. Um, Morgan gives me a heavy sigh. Like, why do you get these things? Anyway, but yeah. Where was I? Oh, right. Rome, or Italy, very nice, very lovely. Not much in the way of natural resources, and certainly not very big. But then suddenly, boom! In less time than it took to just take Italy, Rome now has control over 10 times as much area. Boom, just huge, huge. Huge gains. Um, and with that comes problems. Um, Rome's Rome's wealth blossomed. It exploded almost overnight. You might say, how is 150 years overnight? Um, Almost overnight in the historical perspective, and also because 150 years, it didn't take, they didn't get access to that wealth over the full 150 years. They were fighting Carthage off and on over 150 years, but they only came into full control over those resources in the last decade or so of that period when they finally won. Um, so yeah, Roman wealth blew up almost overnight. Um, and this is a society that is, remember from earlier videos, yes, there were earlier videos. Yes, 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 you were supposed to remember things from them. That is correct. Okay, yes, thank you. Goodbye. No, anyway, remember from earlier videos, uh, the roaming system is unequal by design. It's not supposed to be equal. And at a certain modest wealth level, the gap between the rich and the poor could be relatively modest. We have by design inequality, but still inequality that isn't like huge. But as the wealth of Rome grows with its territorial conquests, because the wealth is not being spread equally, the gap between rich and poor grows larger and larger and larger and larger, and oh my god, now it's huge! And that is not a recipe for social stability. Um, that's not a good thing to have happen. Um, if you want your civil society to remain civil, if you will. Okay, so this was a complicated situation. Rome won, but at what cost? Literally. They seem to have walked away with all the prizes, but some of those prizes are going to turn out to be problematic for them in ways that they can't understand from their perspective of history. A side note to all this, I don't think any of this would have occurred without Alexander the Great. Let me explain briefly, because otherwise this video will be like 2 hours, so I'll try to be brief. Remember, Alexander the Great, 336, he was king in 336, lived until 323 BCE. In those 13 years, he took on and destroyed the Persian Empire. Okay. The Persian Empire controlled the what we would call the Near East, the Levant, and Mesopotamia, and or the Levant anyway. Mesopotamia is getting more into the Middle East. The Persian Empire controlled the Near East, the Middle East. It controlled the Iberia or the Persian Peninsula. It controlled Anatolia. For a while, it exerted influence over mainland Greece, which is right next to Rome. Um, the Persians did not control Carthaginian territory, not North Africa or Western Mediterranean, but I don't believe that if tiny regional power Rome had tried to expand beyond Italy while the Persians were around, I don't know that the Persians would have been cool with that. You see what I'm saying? If Rome had started getting crazy ideas about moving outside of Italy and establishing their influence elsewhere, while the biggest empire the world had ever known at that time was around, I think that the Persians would have had something to say about it, and Rome might never have successfully expanded. But because Alexander kicked the crap out of the Persians and then died and left chaos in his wake with no big players left in the old Persian territory, because of that, I think that there were no grown-ups left in the room, if you will. When Rome got into a slap fight with Carthage, nobody was there to intervene. There was no massive empire just east of there that could stop any of that from happening. It was just Carthage and just Rome, and they had to figure out how to solve their problems themselves because mom is busy taking a nap or watching her stories. Whatever. So I do feel like Alexander the Great kind of sets the stage for what happens next. Accidentally, of course, because once he destroys the Persian Empire, he removes a massive power that might have prevented from happening everything that happened next. Okay, so um, let's move on. So that was the whole deal with Carthage. Um, that was the whole deal with Carthage. Um, Greece also comes into this, but kind of as an afterthought, if you ask me. Um, the Romans had occasional little minor wars with the Greeks throughout this period, but basically around the end of this time, around 150, um, the actual year is 146 BCE, but around 150, Rome just flat out conquers Greece and comes into control of it. It's almost like they decided, well, we've got all this other new territory anyway. Let's just take Greece. Whatever. Let's just have some. Let's just have a helping of Greece. So now, if you look at the map, you can see that controlling everything from Greece all the way westward through Italy and along the northern Mediterranean coast, which basically means southern France and uh, southwestern Spain, all the way to the Straits of Gibraltar, and then all the way back east along the North African coast, the southern Mediterranean coast, um, all the way back east to Egypt, which Rome did not have under its domination yet, but it's going to have soon. Um, all the way back to the east towards Egypt. Rome controls almost the entire Mediterranean coast at this point. Um, so a far cry from being just the masters of Italy. That's a lot. They've massively increased their territory, their wealth, their power, um, all of just massively increased over the course of 150 years. And frankly, that's just a mo money, mo problems kind of situation. I'm never going to say that again. I can't pull it off. But it's a lot. Their government was never intended to handle this much wealth or territory. So, so let's see what happens next, huh? I should have broken this into two videos, but you know what? I don't care. Republic fail. Skill issue. Skill issue. Get good. So the next 100 years are gonna get bad, y'all. They're gonna get bad. Um, the next 100 years, things are gonna get ugly. Here's the thing. Various historians will argue about when the Roman Republic ended. The classic story, like the classic way of looking at it, is that the Roman Republic did not end until the first Roman emperor. And that makes sense, right? That makes sense. You say, well, until there's an emperor, there's no empire. And until there's an empire, there's still a republic. So the republic doesn't end until the beginning of the empire. Ta-da! Ta-ta-ta-ta. Wah. Um, that makes sense. Uh, but some Roman historians like to say stuff like, well, the Republic really ended, um, 100 years before the first emperor because it was already doomed. It was the Republican institutions had failed. The Republic really ended in 82 BCE when Sulla is that Sulla? Hang on a minute. Uh, the Roman Republic really ended in 82 BCE when Sulla, uh, you know, marched his army into Rome and purged his enemies because a healthy republic doesn't have a military dictator. People can argue over stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. I like to stick with the classic view. The Roman Republic ended when the first emperor becomes emperor. Um, because if you, to get slightly graphic, if you shoot a guy and he's bleeding out, you don't say he's dead until he's actually dead, damn it. Every moment before that, he's just hurt real bad. And maybe he ain't gonna make it, right? Maybe there's no way he's gonna survive this, but he's still alive until the whole thing actually stops, until it's all guncore. Um, there is a period of time when the Roman Republic is, you might say, mortally wounded. And there's probably a period of time where you can say it's not gonna get better. Like some people might hold out some naive hope that after Sulla or even after Caesar, it still might have been possible to save the Republic. And maybe that's not true. Maybe after what happens in the first century CE or BCE, maybe after all that nonsense and the bloodshed and the violence and the civil wars and the revolts, we're going to get to all this, I promise. Maybe after all of that, the Republic couldn't be saved. That we're watching the end play out in slow motion. Um, maybe that's true. I still don't feel comfortable saying that the Republic is over until there's actually an emperor until it's actually over. I don't know. That's just me. Um, okay. So the uh, the Roman Republic, the things get ugly. Period. Um, hey, come on, come here, come here. What you don't? You always like climbing on me, and suddenly you have no interest in it. Come here. What are you, camera shy? I'm talking to my cat. Sorry. I know some of you are like, why are these videos so long? And here's the ugly secret. These videos are 90% me talking about my cats and 10% humanities. All right, here we go. There we go. Hi. Hi. So this is Galena. Galena is how old? 4 months old. Uh, Galena is a very sweet, loud, social kitty who is now laying on the arm of my chair. Anyway, I was sure you want to see that. So I'm sure you're also like, we don't need to go right into the. We can take a break from the Republic stuff. So anyway, okay, to get on with that, now that your cat interlude is over, um, you can break down, and by you can, I mean I can, and by I can, I mean I will, break down this period from between 150 to 50 into two parts, the political problems part and the political problems turned violent part. Um, and but they're all, but the whole period is basically things going bad. They're not separate eras. They are connected, and it's not purely. I'm not saying there's no violence in the first period and only violence in the second period. Um, I just want to sort of, give you a general breakdown. This whole era is just jacked. The growth of inequality has accelerated corruption of public institutions, and it's also given greater incentive to the upper classes, the noble class, the senatorial class. It's given greater incentive to the ruling class to hold on to their power. They have more power and wealth to hold on to. And so you can see how these are linked. Greater inequality means greater corruption. Greater corruption means greater dissatisfaction among the general population who aren't happy with the way things are going. Um, as the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, the breakdown of the civil institutions, etc. They don't like this. They try to use the Republican systems, the electoral politics, to reform things. They want land reform. They want tax reform. They want issues about civil rights to be addressed. They want legislation to restrict the use of slaves because slaves are taking jobs from Roman citizens, etc., etc. They want legislation uh, uh, like people in every democratic republic everywhere. They want legislation that will make their lives better. They want the system to be more fair. They want the civil institutions to work better. They want legislation that will protect their jobs, improve their lives, secure their rights, so on and so forth. That's what they want. The problem is, again, remember, I'm going to say it until I get blue in the face and until you hate my guts. The Roman system was designed to be unequal. It was designed to be unfair. It was designed to favor the interests of the absolute upper class, the senatorial class. which is a problem. Sorry, Kalinga. I yell real loud and she jumps. It's a problem because um, as soon as the lower classes start gaining some political traction, the senatorial class is then faced with a choice. If they let the processes, the political processes, unfold in the way that they should unfold under the rule of law, then they lose some of their power. And if they try to stop things from happening, they have to go outside of the rule of law. Here's an example from modern times. Let's just take an example to help you understand this. Let's imagine some big company that sells something that's bad for you, like tobacco. Big tobacco. They have lots of money. They're selling cigarettes, whatever. Things are good for them. People start becoming aware that cigarettes are super bad for you, and that they think that maybe there should be some closer oversight of this industry. Maybe there should be rules about selling cigarettes to kids, things like that, whatever. Maybe the cigarette company should be required to be more honest about the dangers of their product, what have you. And they want to vote for legislation that will, do all these things. Now, if the big tobacco companies decide to respect the political process and say, well, we live in a representative, under a representative form of government. It's bad for us, but I'm going to have to, what are we going to do? Right? That's the law. That's the way politics works. It's the way the rule of law works. We can't subvert the rule of law, guys, can we? If they decide not to subvert the rule of law, things get less good for them. They lose some of their money and power. But what happened in real history is that they decided to try to subvert the rule of law. They bribed people. They did wildly illegal things in order to make sure that the legislation that the popular legislation that people wanted did not pass, at least at first, it did eventually. But they tried to subvert the rule of law. In other words, remember, this is a society founded on the rule of law, founded on the idea that powerful people can't just do anything they want, that a king, an aristocracy can't do anything at once, that they are governed by laws, that they're answerable to the laws, and those laws are shaped by the people. So the problem is, during this period between 150 and 100, really, at Kursk, and really after, but let's just stick there at Kursk. Between 150 and 100, even though under the Roman system, the senatorial class, the upper class, had more influence over the shape of the law, there are only so many members of the upper class, and there are lots and lots and lots of members of the lower classes, and there's more of them every day. Which means that eventually the lower classes are going to start getting some of what they want through the political process, through the rule of law. And the upper classes have to decide whether they're going to abide by the rules or whether they're going to start breaking the rules as soon as the rules are working against them. Guess what they did? Right? Shocker, I know. Any parallels to current political situations is purely coincidental. Either let me rephrase. Any parallels to current political situations are either purely coincidental, or they are in fact structural defects in the nature of Republican governments. Anyway, one of the two. Um, anyway, so yeah, basically what happened is during this period 150 to 50 and especially 150 to 100, um, the senatorial class, faced with the possibility that the game that they were playing was going to go against them, decided to flip the table. They weren't going to take it anymore. If the rule of law becomes inconvenient to the people in power, they'll decide to disregard the rule of law. Who cares? And even if that means undermining the entire Republican system that Rome was built on, and weakening the very fabric of their society, as long as they get stay in charge, baby, that's what they're going to do. As some examples, in 133, a representative of the people, the office was called tribune. So this guy is a tribune, a representative of the common people, was beaten to death by a mob, wait for it, of senators. Beaten to death by a mob, not just a mob of senators. So, like, imagine that. Imagine that there's like a popular politician who's elected to represent the common people, and he's in Washington giving a speech about needing to reform the government and change things so that the system is more fair, and he gets beaten to death by senators who don't want the system to be more fair. That's bonkers. Shit is broken, man. In 121 BCE, the Senate voted special powers to the consul. The consul is like president. The Senate voted special powers to the consul solely for the purpose of defeating reforms that would have helped the common people. Again, imagine if legislation got passed that would make things more fair, that would make taxes better for the common people, or make give the common people more rights or something like that. And imagine if the response from Washington was to give the president special new powers just so he could stop that from happening. Shit is broken. In 100 BCE, a candidate for consul, again, like president, a presidential candidate, in other words, was assassinated by his rivals because they were pretty sure he was going to win. And they didn't like the fact that if he won, he was going to push for reforms to the system that would take away some of the power of the upper classes. It's crazy, y'all. This is bananas. This is a sign of a broken system. This is bad. They're like, oh, well, if we'll just run against him and we'll win the election and we'll not have the reforms. Oh, we're going to lose the election? Well, I guess we'll just have to kill him. No, that's not how elections are supposed to work. The people who are losers are supposed to be like, well, we lost, we'll try again next election cycle. They're not supposed to start riots at the Capitol. Wait, that's somebody else. Sorry, that was somebody else. They're not supposed to assassinate their political rivals. It's broken when the peaceful transfer of power and the rule of law are not respected by people in power. Your republic is dying. Your republic is jacked. When people say, hey, if we win the next election, we're not going to worry about having any future elections because we'll have it rigged. Wait, again, that was someone else, sorry. that wasn't a Roman. Oh, who did say that? Oh, not important. Anyway, not important. Uh, so things we're screwed. The Republic is dying. Anyway, yeah, yeah. Anyway, um, Morgan has requested that I not reveal. sorry, sorry, that's not how they phrased it. That I not tell you that our country is doomed. Anyway. Hey, like I said, the Republic ain't dead till it's dead. There's a reason I said that. We'll see. Anyway, so that's the period between 150 and 100. And if you thought that was bad, things get worse after. In 91, a bunch of Roman allies started a revolt and declared themselves independent because Rome was an absolute dumpster fire. And they were like, we don't need this shit. In 82 BCE, a consul, the president, institutes a military takeover of Rome and starts killing people. He doesn't like killing anyone who's against him. Um, he decided to use the army against the enemy within. Um, I'm doing it again. Sorry, I'm doing it again. I can't help it. It just happens by accident. Doing it again. Who said that? Anyway. Um, Sykes used the army against the enemy within. And boy, he did. Thousands of people died. Super bad. They eventually, pulled back from the brink there, and they thought they were okay. Like, hey, we got rid of that guy. It's gonna be fine. We're okay, right? We're okay, right? Right? Um, it's kind of dicey. Um, in 71 BCE, there were slave revolts, widespread slave revolts. Um, Another crisis for the Republic. But the last gasp, the last days of the Republic began in around 50 BCE. Technically 49, but I say around 50 because I'm saying that the period from 150 to 50, so roughly 100 years, is when things start going rapidly downhill. So just to put it in perspective, 500, sorry, let me get 500 to 300, slow expansion over Italy, the Republic is relatively stable, boom. 300 to 150, rapid expansion over the Western Mediterranean and Greece, the Republic is starting to become obscenely wealthy, the gap between rich and poor is growing, corruption is on the rise, things are becoming unstable. The period between 150 and 50, the instability caused by massive wealth inequalities and corruption comes home to roost. The political process is subverted. The civil institutions are subverted. The rule of law is going out the window. Riots, revolts by allies, or allies abandoning them, civil wars, assassinations. And then, the final chapter. In 49 BCE, Julius Caesar marches on Rome. That's all I'm going to say about that. No, there's more to say. Including, what now? Who is this guy? Why is he doing this again? And how the hell did that actually work? Don't you love my bullet points? Aren't they super informative? Okay. This video is already like an hour and 10 minutes. This is going to be a long video. I'm sorry. I will try to wrap up as much of this content as I can. Consider this a double feature, if you will. Kind of a double video. Two in one. Um, so Julius Caesar. Um, Big Julie. Sorry. Right? Guys and Gals? Gary Guys and Gals? Yeah, Mythical. Well, I feel like that's where they got it from. Um, anyway. Um, Sorry, I'm not going to relate that conversation. It was super specific interests. Um, no need to go into that. Anyway, um, Julius Caesar had been a consul at the time of 49 BCE when he marched his army into Rome. He was a governor of Gaul. Um, Let me explain. Julius Caesar was a politician. He worked his way up through the elected offices. In Rome, if you wanted to get elected to high office like consul, you had to work your way up by being elected to lesser offices and then winning the election to consul. Yeah. It was not an official thing. It wasn't a law. It was just a custom. Uh, for those who are geeky and interested in it, it was called the Cursus Honorum, the path of honor. Um, and the It would be like imagine if we wouldn't even as a society imagine if that we as a society wouldn't even consider voting for anyone for president if they hadn't started off on their city council and then gotten elected to the state legislature and then gotten elected to like the House of Representatives and then gotten elected to the Senate and then they could run for president, like, and then and only then. Like, what if that was like the normal custom for our society? That if they hadn't done that, completed their course of honor, that we wouldn't even think about voting for them for president. They wouldn't be qualified. That's kind of how this is. Caesar had worked his way up through the various elected offices, and he had made it to the office of president, aka consul. Again, it's not exactly, the parallel isn't exact between president and consul, but it's close enough for you to get the idea. The problem is, Caesar was not a super rich guy. He was from an upper middle class family, but he wasn't a noble. Now, he had relatives who were nobles, but he wasn't like from one of the tippity top families. He was just doing well. But political campaigns then as now require money. You gotta have money. So Caesar financed his political career by borrowing money at every step along the way. He borrowed money to run his political campaigns along the whole path. And that's a lot of political campaigns because he wasn't just running for one office. This is not just coming out of nowhere and running for president. He had to work his way up. So he ran for a lot of offices. He had to borrow money at each step. And there you go. Okay. Now, so Caesar owes a lot of people a lot of money. He has not been paying them back because, again, he is in government service. And even in classical Rome, that is not the most lucrative thing you can do with your time. However, he cannot be sued. There's a law. He cannot be sued as long as he holds some kind of office. Okay. That is crucial. Caesar's time as consul was coming to an end. This is all prior to 49. Caesar's time as consul was coming to an end. He needed a new office to go into. He could not run for consul again. I don't need to go into why, just trust me, he couldn't. He couldn't run for consul again. So he got himself named governor of Gaul. Gaul was a Roman province, which is like saying it's a territory that Rome is in charge of, but it's not properly Roman territory itself. Like, here's an example: Guam. I don't know if you're familiar with Guam or Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is probably one you might have heard of. Guam and Puerto Rico, these are U.S. territories. The United States Virgin Islands, a territory of the United States. It is controlled by the United States, but it is not part of the United States. The people in Guam do not live in a state. They don't live in the United States, they live in Guam, but the United States controls Guam. I don't know, it seems like a stupid system to me. As far as I'm concerned, just it's a state, just make it a state. I don't know, call me weird. But there you go. Gaul, which is basically part of Eastern France and a good part of Germany, as we would call it now. It's up in Europe, it's north of Italy, across the mountains there. Gaul is a Roman territory, it's a Roman province. And he got himself named Governor of Gaul. So he's basically in charge of that area, keeping everything cool. As Governor of Gaul, one of the things he does is he oversees the German tribes that are allies of Rome. Some German tribes were paid allies of Rome. They were legal allies of Rome, which is to say that Rome would have a treaty with them that the Senate had approved. Would have a treaty with these tribes, and they would pay them and all kinds of stuff. And in return, the German tribe in question, would kind of help keep an eye on the borders. And this is so that the Romans didn't have to maintain an extra stupidly huge army in the territory. They could have a smaller army in the territory and rely on Roman allies, Roman tribal allies, to do the rest. Okay. So far, so good.
Shush, baby.
Caesar is governor of Gaul. He has responsibility for the Roman tribal allies in Gaul. Caesar's time as governor is coming to an end. Caesar still owes a bunch of money to a bunch of people. And when his office as governor comes to a term, when his term is over, he will have to return to Rome. He will get dragged into court. He will have to pay a bunch of money. Caesar needs a way to make a bunch of money quick while he is stuck in the back ass end of nowhere. He is stuck in the sticks. He is out in the boonies. So he needs to get rich fast while living in the boonies. Sounds difficult. This is a moment where you need to invent something like Crocs that are scented, or like stick on paste on eyeglasses or something. I don't know. Um, Morgan is looking at me like I'm nuts.
I'm a little worried about that.
You need some kind of something. Um, Caesar decided not to invent edible body spray. Instead, what he did was he came up with a different way to get rich, and it was kind of shady. He wrote back, so the German tribes practiced a form of agriculture. I'm not going to go into detail on this. I won't. The German tribes practiced a form of agriculture where occasionally they had to pick up and move from one area to another. It's called extensive agriculture. Again, I'm not going to go into it. They had to move from one area to another. So periodically, the German tribes would migrate. As an entire tribe, they'd pick up all their possessions, men, women, children, the whole thing, and they would move from one area to another within the same territory. This started happening. One of the tribes picked up and was moving from one area to another. They had notified their Roman allies, so the Romans knew what was going on. It was a peaceful migration that involved their entire population, men, women, children. It was not a military movement. Literally anyone who was at all familiar with them would understand that. Caesar, this started happening. One of the tribes was moving. Caesar seized upon this. That's why they call him Caesar. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Caesar jumped on it and wrote back to Rome that the tribes were restless and that there was a militarily aggressive move. And he used that movement as an excuse to attack the tribe and wipe them out. Men, women, children, the whole kit and caboodle. And take all their stuff. So not nice. Not cool. Caesar. Bad Caesar. Bad. Not very naughty. Genocide is very naughty. Anyway, it is. Anyway. This did not go over well with the other German tribes. Some of them were allies of Rome. Some of them weren't. All of them hated it. So effectively what Caesar did was start a war with all of the German tribes that went on for years. And he pissed off a bunch of Roman allies that weren't Roman allies anymore after that. So this infuriated the senators back home. They didn't like Caesar very much to begin with because Caesar was kind of a pro-common person, pro-reform kind of guy. He was in favor of reforming things, so the senatorial class did not like him. This only inflamed their dislike of Caesar. Caesar spent years fighting the German tribes. He won, rather improbably, because he was severely outnumbered, but he was a super good general. So Caesar won. He destroyed the German resistance to the German tribes. He captured their leader of the unified German tribal people, which, by the way, the German tribes had never been unified before. They often fought each other. So imagine how pissed off at Rome they had to be to all come together under one leadership. That had never happened. That's how furious they were. Anyway, he captured the German tribal leader Vercingetorix. He made himself a ton of money from looting the tribes of all their goods. He was able to pay off his creditors and send money back to Rome in order to fund lavish feasts and games, spectacles for the public. So he made the common people love him. All they knew was he was a war hero. Right? They don't know the politics of it. They don't know all that shit. All they know is that he's out there kicking butt. Our guy is winning wars, baby. And if you try to say he started the war, they go, shut up, do you hate Rome? Shut up. They could say, put on your flag t-shirt and be quiet. Wait, I mean, kind of, anyway. No flags, but you get the idea. You get the idea. He's kicking butt. And yeah, like I said, Caesar would fund public feasts for the common people. He would fund public games and spectacles for the common people. Yeah, it was. He was very wealthy by this point. He was very popular with the common people. He had paid off all his debts. You would think he's sitting on top of the world. You would think, but he wasn't. Because, two things. First, his term of office as governor expired a while ago. He had outstayed his term. The Senate kept writing letters to him insisting that he come back to Rome, uh, but he didn't. He was just there. Why didn't they send someone to arrest him? Probably because they knew if they sent someone, that person would lose and therefore die and would make the Senate look weak. So they just stuck with writing letters. The second thing is the Senate had declared his wars on Roman allies to be illegal. Shocking, right? His wars on Roman allies were illegal. So he had outstayed his term of governor. He had committed illegal warfare. The Senate was furious with him. So that's where it stands. Caesar is popular with common Romans, both for his politics and for the fact that he's a war hero, and for the fact that he basically spent a bunch of money making the common people happy. But the senators, the elite who run the government, did not like him because technically he was a war criminal and technically he had broken a bunch of other government laws. Okay. Okay. So, in 49 BCE, they do something very potentially troublesome. In 49 BCE, they pass a resolution naming Caesar an enemy of Rome. What this means is that Caesar is no longer a citizen. If a Roman citizen sees him, that Roman citizen is legally obligated to kill him on sight. Basically, they unpersoned him. They kicked him out. Imagine if there was someone that was so hated in America today that the government just passed a law that said, you know what, he's no longer an American. And in fact, if you see him, punch him in the face. Right? Imagine if that was the case. Like, imagine if that's what they did with Giggy. Right? I mean, I know he's got a lot of stuff going on right now. And imagine if they're like, you know what, this guy sucks. Let's just, he's no longer, we're revoking his citizenship, and if anyone sees him, kick his ass. That's basically what happened. Okay, so the problem is, while this may have been warranted, technically Caesar was a war criminal and also just like a criminal. This might have been warranted, but it was also a crazy, extreme move that left Caesar with nowhere to go, with his back against the wall. Because what was Caesar supposed to do? They kept telling him, come home, come home, come home and stand trial. Come home. You have done illegal things, you must stand trial and face consequences. Come back home. And then basically they said, if you come home now, you'll be killed. What's he going to do? They told him he couldn't stay in Gaul, and he doesn't want to stay in Gaul. And now they told him he can't come home. I don't know how they expected him to respond. I'm not saying they weren't justified. I'm just saying I don't know how they expected him to respond. From a political angle, it seems stupid. It leaves you, what's supposed to happen next? What do you think is going to happen next? Morgan and I have talked before about various theories about why they did it. There's a lot to say there, The the short version is this. Caesar's right-hand man, Mark Antony, was in Rome at the time when this was passed. Antony was serving as tribune of the people, so he's a representative of the common people. And one of the powers Antony had was to veto senatorial resolutions. He could say, no, you're not doing that. So Morgan and I think that one of the things that was what they thought was going to happen was that the Senate was going to pass this to show how serious they were, as sort of a warning shot at Caesar, fully expecting that Antony would veto it. Because what kind of guy is going to let his boss get branded an enemy of Rome? That's cuckoo. Fully expecting that Antony would veto it, but Antony did not veto it. As for why, various theories have been advanced. If Antony didn't realize he could, that makes him kind of an idiot, and he wasn't. Some think that there may have been one theory that's been offered is that there was some kind of disturbance. A riot may have broken out due to the legislation between supporters and detractors of Caesar, and Antony was just physically unable to deliver his veto. That's maybe a little implausible. I don't know. I'm sure that if there was a riot, there'd probably be some record of that. I don't know. But possibly Antony didn't veto it because he and Caesar anticipated it, and Caesar wanted the excuse to do what he did next, and so Antony just sat on his hands, let them pass it, let the Senate paint themselves into a corner, and he did not rescue them from their own stupidity, maybe, that they were expecting him to do. They were expecting Antony will veto this, so we don't have to follow through on it. We can say we're being tough, but Antony will stop us from actually having to be tough. And Antony was like, no, you go right ahead, buddy. Go on. And so that may have been what happened. That's the only version that really... In that case, the Senate was kind of stupid, but not too stupid. It certainly makes Antony and Caesar the very clever ones. Anyway. However it went down, the bottom line is, in 49 BCE, Caesar had no options left to him. He couldn't stay in Gaul, he couldn't go back to Rome. He was not the kind of man to tuck his tail between his legs. He certainly was not going to just give up and say, oh well, I guess they got me. That wasn't going to happen. So what he did was he decided to say, screw it. I'm taking over the whole ball of wax. He got his army together. He marched toward Rome. And he took over. The senatorial class, the senators had to flee Rome. They could not whip up a military resistance to him fast enough to stop him. He was moving so quickly from Gaul, he outpaced their ability to raise armed forces to stop him. So they had to flee Rome. They abandoned Rome to him. He was able to take over without spilling a drop of blood. And the senatorial forces, the senators eventually did raise an army to oppose him. They left Rome, they got an army together and came back to try to fight him, but it was a bad look, y'all. It was a bad look. They had to leave Rome clutching their skirts, and Caesar took over without having to fight for it even. They just gave him Rome, and he took over, and he said, I'm in charge now, bitches. I'm running this place in my house. Um, yeah. And so Caesar became the guy who was running everything. Now, Caesar is not the first emperor of Rome. So what Caesar did is the precursor to the empire. Caesar, in his own way, was trying to save the republic. I genuinely believe that. Caesar had a little bit of a supervillain vibe to him. He was definitely like, I'm gonna conquer. Like remember Alexander? Alexander was like, I'm gonna conquer the world, but it's totally for your own good, right? It's totally for your own good, y'all. I'm gonna conquer the world, but it's to unite humanity. Totally a positive reason to conquer the world. Caesar wanted to take over Rome to fix Rome. Now, did he also want personal power? Probably. But I don't know if that was like a devious secret agenda so much as it's just Caesar genuinely thought he was the smartest and best person in the room, so why shouldn't he be in charge? Right? I don't know if it was like a secret agenda, like, I'll let them believe I want to help Rome when I really just want to rule it. Like, I don't think it was like that so much as the complete arrogance of someone who knows he's the best, or thinks he is anyway, and just thinks that, of course I'm in charge. I am the best qualified. And everyone's like, Rug, and it's like, it's just true. It's not Rug if it's true. Like, he's one of those people, right? How can it be rude? It's true. Anyone who's ever said that to you, legally you're allowed to punch them. No? That's not a law? That's some bullshit. It should be a law. But you know that Caesar would be that bitch. Caesar would absolutely be that person. It's not rude if it's true, honey. Caesar would be like, I am the smartest person in the room. Why are you mad? Oh my god. Haters. Anyway, 100% Caesar. I am now, okay, this is my new headcanon for how Caesar talked. Um, from now on, anytime I imagine Caesar saying anything, that's how he talked. Yeah! Um, so Caesar is in charge. Caesar wants to fix Rome. Remember, he's a reformer. He's not one of those guys who wants to keep everything as the status quo. He is a reformer. He wants to fix Rome. And he immediately sets about doing that. Here's the thing, and this video is running long, I know, so I'm going to try and get through this very quickly. Here's the thing. First, he has to defeat the senatorial forces in combat. He does. But what happens next? Remember, I said Sulla, who is a consul, Sulla had a military coup and purged his enemies. He killed thousands of people. Caesar didn't do that, which is another thing that convinced a lot of people that maybe Caesar was okay, that he wasn't really a bad guy. Caesar welcomed the senators back. He welcomed them back. As long as they would agree he was in charge, he welcomed them back. He got them to vote him the title of dictator. Now, dictator, okay, it sounds bad. A dictator is a bad thing in our language. But in Rome, dictator just literally meant a guy who had emergency powers that let him do whatever he wanted. The office of dictator existed in Roman law, and it was for emergencies. The Senate could declare someone a dictator for a limited period, and for a limited period, the dictator would have special powers. He could do anything he wanted, and he was supposed to use those powers to fix the crisis, and then those powers would go away, and he would go back to being a regular dude, and everything would be okay. This was hard coded into Roman law. It was a thing. So, Caesar got them to vote him dictator. The fact that he wanted the Senate to give him special powers rather than just taking those special powers, and the fact that he wanted it to happen under the auspices of the office of dictator shows that he wanted this all to appear legal and above board. The powers of the dictator were conferred by the Senate in order to solve a crisis. By asking the Senate to vote him dictator, Caesar implied that there was a crisis already happening and that he had to be the one to solve it. Now, some people will say that's very hypocritical because Caesar is the one who caused the crisis. Caesar marched his army into Rome. If there's a crisis, it's because Caesar made a crisis. But I don't think that's how Caesar or his supporters would have seen it. Remember all the stuff we talked about. Remember all the absolute shenaniganery that was going on in Rome prior to Caesar marching on Rome in 49. 100 years of absolute unmitigated bullshit. And especially the last 50 years. I think Caesar would have argued, and his supporters would have argued as well, that there was already a crisis in the Republic. Caesar did march his army into Rome. Technically, that was illegal, and yes, he should not have done that. Agree. But that's water under the bridge at this point, I think Caesar and his faction would have said. It's like, yes, some laws were broken. Fine, some laws were broken along the way. But let's focus on the present, right? Let's focus on what's happening now. Things are bad. Someone needs to fix it. I can be the person who fixes it. Vote me dictator. Everything will be fine. The Senate went along with this. Did they go along with it because they believed it and they bought into his lying? Probably not, given what happens later. Probably not. But they were also terribly afraid of him. He had just beaten all their armies. And then he graciously invited them back and did not kill them. They were aware he could change his mind at any point. So they went along with it. They voted him dictator for a period of 5 years. And Caesar sets about using his powers to fix Rome. Did he actually fix Rome? Kinda, a little bit. Started to. Did Caesar aggrandize himself with his powers? Kinda, a little bit. Started to. So it's a mix of good and bad. Caesar had statues built and things like that, sure. Absolutely. He had public works projects that bore his name. Absolutely. But those public works projects that were supposed to fix the infrastructure and all this, they employed people. They employed working Romans, not slaves. He instituted land reforms. He gave land to his soldiers. Who had served him faithfully. He instituted tax reforms. He tried to ensure that civil rights were protected. Did Caesar break the law big time when he marched on Rome? Yes. Did he basically hold the Senate at gunpoint and force them to name him dictator? Yes. Did he then use his powers to actually address a lot of the problems that plagued Roman society? Yes, he did. Does that make him a good guy or a bad guy? I don't know. Man, I don't know. It's, shit, I don't know. Look, if it happened in modern day America, I would say he's a bad guy. I don't think I would be hesitant there. I think if someone instituted a takeover for our government and used military force to do it, I would be angry about that no matter what. Like, no matter how it turned out, I would still think it was wrong. But I will be honest, if someone instituted a military takeover of the government and then started, like, making things better for everyday Americans, I would understand how everyday Americans might not be too concerned about the military takeover thing. Right? Like, I would still be kind of salty about it, but I would totally get why a lot of people would be willing to overlook it. Because there's serious problems in America nowadays, and people need to. A lot of people are hurting, and a lot of people are, they're a lot more worried about things happening in their personal lives. Uh, they got medical bills, they got student debt, they're watching their public school systems fall apart. They're concerned about things that affect them personally on an immediate level. And I think if somebody like did something constitutionally illegal, but then started fixing those day-to-day issues, I feel like I wouldn't feel the same way personally, but I genuinely feel like I would understand why a lot of Americans would probably like be kind of cool with it. Like, if I'm right, I don't know. Maybe most Americans would decide they weren't cool with it, but I feel like a lot of them would be, and I feel like I get it. Um, I feel like I would understand. So, is Caesar a good guy or a bad guy? I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm kind of leaning toward bad guy, but I don't know. So what happens? Well, how does this turn out? How did that work out for him, in other words? Remember, that was one of my bullet points. One of my absolute genius informative bullet points. So we've got what now? He marched to Rome. Who is this guy? I told you about Caesar's life. Why is he doing this again? I told you about all of the enemy of Rome thing and fixing Rome. How the hell did that actually work? Well, here's how it worked. I have him down as 49 to 44. Caesar is dictator. Um, because I said that they voted him dictatorial powers for 5 years, you might think that his office term of office as dictator expired and he just quietly went about his business. Sad to say, that's not what happened. He retired and started a super cheap pizza chain. No, he didn't do that. I will say this, Little Caesar's Pizza is not super good, but it's super good for the price. Don't try to reheat it. Not recommended. But for the price, very tasty. Um, anyway. No, he did not start a pizza chain. In 44 BCE, Julius Caesar tried to get the Senate that he had scared to death to change the to vote him dictator for life. Now, if you've been paying attention, that's not the way the office of dictator worked. The whole idea was the office of dictator is temporary. You're only supposed to be dictator long enough to address the crisis. Once the crisis is over, you lose your dictatorial powers, you go home, and everything goes back to being the way it was. No one has too much power. Life is cool and fruity. Caesar had dictatorial powers for 5 years. His term of office as dictator was coming to an end. He felt that things still needed to be done. The Senate was very ready for him to be finished. He asked for dictatorial powers for life. The Senate decided he was basically setting himself up as a king. We know how the Romans feel about kings. They killed their last one. And guess what they did to Caesar? Famously assassinated. by the senators. He went to a meeting of the Senate in the Forum of Jupiter, not in the Senate. They always depict it as happening in the Senate, on the Senate floor. He went to a meeting in the Forum of Jupiter across the street. I realize everyone, they want it to be on the Senate floor. It's more poetic, it's more picturesque. It was in the Forum of Jupiter. I'm sorry to ruin your childhood. Sorry, I don't know what connection that has to your childhood. Anyway, yeah, I'm sorry to ruin your beloved childhood memories of Ixing assassination, Charlie Brown. Um, of Act 2, Charlie Brown.
What is wrong with you?
Mm. That joke is funny if you know something about the assassination of Caesar. Anyway, I just cracked myself up. When Caesar, I'm not going to explain it. You go look it up. Ectu Brute, go look it up. Anyway, um, Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, the assassination.
I mean, you should read it.
You should read it anyway. It's a great play. Anyway,
Mark Antony's speeches.
yeah, it's actually delightful. Anyway. He went to a meeting of the Senate at the Forum of Jupiter, and the senators stabbed the shit out of him, and he died. As happens when someone has stabbed the shit out of you. Um, as one does. As was the custom at the time. Um, um, he dies. And the Senate believed that they had saved the Republic. So first of all, Julius Caesar he never styled himself as an emperor. Right up until the end, he only styled himself as dictator, and the office was only supposed to be temporary. So everything that happened with Julius Caesar was technically still under the auspices of the Republican law of Rome. And then the senators killed him explicitly to save the Republic, to restore normal order to the Republic. We got rid of the dictator. Now we can go back to just having elections and Senate votes and things like that. Yay. But that's not what happened. And I'm going to get into why later, because this video is already like half an hour over. I'll get into why in the next video. That's not what happened, because the people were not going to go back. The Senate killed Caesar to restore the status quo. But as we can see, the status quo sucked for most people. The status quo was broken institutions, a wildly unequal economy, a senatorial class that was so removed from the concerns of the common people and so unafraid of repercussions for their actions that they would assassinate rivals, they would beat up the representatives of the people, that they would continue to pass laws to screw over the common people and help themselves. The status quo was not working. The Republic was sick unto death. It was not well. It needed to be fixed. Did Caesar overstep by invading his own city, by did Caesar overstep by using the military to take over and then trying to get himself declared dictator for life? Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yeah, he definitely broke the rule of law. He definitely did illegal things. Did Caesar improve things by trying to change them from the status quo? Yeah, definitely, indisputably. So when the Senate killed Caesar to try to restore the status quo, I hate to say it, but that was a pipe dream. That was never going to happen. It was never going to happen. Caesar was incredibly popular with the common people, and the status quo was incredibly unpopular with the common people. What did they think was going to happen? We're going to kill this guy that the rest of the population loves, and then we're going to put everything back to the way that the rest of the population hated. Super plan, y'all. Real effective. It's going to go over great. No! It's like when a TV show that's super popular in its first season fires the showrunner and then changes everything about the show that fans liked. How is that supposed to work? What did you think was going to happen? And then they're baffled when nobody watches the show in the second season. Shocking! They fired Caesar. And then wanted to change everything about what was going on to things that people didn't want. The murder of Caesar, the assassination of Caesar by the Senate in 44 BCE, is going to kick off a period of nearly 15 years of civil war as different factions fight for control. And in the end, the last man left standing, Octavian, Caesar's nephew, we'll get into that in the next video. The last man left standing has all the power. He has no rivals left. And unlike his uncle, he is not going to get caught with his toga down. He is going to consolidate all of his power. He's going to make sure that no Senate is ever going to mess with him again. And he is going to be the first Roman emperor. He is going to basically say, screw the rule of law, I'm in charge, and that's just how it is. And the rule of law is never again, the Republican system is never again going to function as a republic in the rest of Rome's history. There will be the pretense of a republic, the fiction of a republic. There will be elections, but only of people Octavian approves of. There will be a Senate to pass laws, but only the laws that Octavian wants passed. And so on and so forth. Once Octavian becomes senator, that's it. That's it for the rule of law. Everybody after him is going to rule with an iron fist. They're going to rule like an autocrat. Remember autocrats? Talked about in an earlier video? Yeah, there were earlier videos. Yeah, you should watch them. Remember autocrats? He's going to rule like an autocrat. There's no more republic. So that's why I say, bringing it all back. Bring it back, y'all. Bring it back. I'm bringing republic back. No, that's not. Justin, you can't bring back the Roman Republic. I know you're powerful. But even you, Justin, can't do that. Now, to bring it all back, that's why I say the Roman Republic ends when the first emperor comes along. Because before that, yeah, the Republic was dysfunctional. Yeah, the Republic was dying. The Republic had massive problems that had to be corrected or else it would die, which it did. The Republic was mortally wounded. The Republic was bleeding out, however you want to phrase it. But it's not over until the fat lady sings. It's not over until it's over. And the Republic isn't over until the first guy who we think of as an emperor takes over, and that's it. That's the official end. 30 BCE. 509 to 30, if you want to be technical. 500 roughly to 30. 509 to 27, if you want to be technical, but 500 to 30 roughly. Um, it was a good run. 470 years, more or less. That's longer than we've been a republic. So, and it looks like we're about to collapse now. So, we may not even make it a little more than halfway. Anyway, a little less than halfway. Yeah, a little less than halfway. We'll see. Anyway, so that's the Republic to Empire. I did not get into the details about Octavian. I was going to, or at least the very beginning, I was going to get into details about the civil war that leads up to Octavian becoming emperor, but I will do that in the next video since we've already run very, very, very long. We just hit the 2 hour mark. I can't believe it. I've been talking for 2 hours. That's a record even for me. So yeah, Lex, just call it here. We'll put a pin in it. You can tell I love talking about the Roman history. Hopefully you enjoy listening to it. And yeah, take care next time. I'll see you next time. Be well. Bye.